Welcome back to the Education Talk podcast. I'm your host, Teacher Anthony, and today we're going to talk about large-scale assessment. Let's begin with defining large-scale assessment. This is an evaluation on a systemic level that measures what learners do for data collection. It serves as a monitoring tool for education systems, spanning global education policy decisions and evaluation. This means that the participating nations within the data collection compare their outcomes against each other, forming what we call a benchmark on what quality and equity of education can be valued. This benchmark is limited to the context, the environment, the interpretation, and how valid the data collection is. In the case of South Africa, the historical and cultural complexity have limited the application of these large-scale assessments. The root is the challenges in linguistic inequality, the shortcomings of the education system that has a negative effect on learners who are tested in a language they are not fluent in. For example, English. Global education systems that utilize large-scale assessment are used to measure what learners know. To implement the decisions that can be made on a systemic level, they use collected data. The measurement follows the principles of validity and reliability. Reliability is based on accuracy and consistency, while validity is based on what is being measured. Assessment frameworks utilize reliability and validity within the South African context, translated content, mixed sampling methods, qualitative and quantitative, and quality control of how the data is collected are aspects that are also considered. With these aspects being met, the influence on policy decisions can be instrumental to design and transformation. This can encourage the addition of higher order content to enhance learner performance in assessments, using evidence in the policy making process. Let's talk South African education environments. How does large-scale assessment tie in with this? The gap between implementation, which is the intent of how policies are made, spans beyond the language of the educational world. South African schools face a broad challenge of translating the national curriculum policy into practice at the school level. Learning outcomes can be misconstrued if the broader context is not considered in how the data is interpreted. Language barriers are examples of an aspect that should be considered before the curriculum reform and teacher training, so that a deeper understanding of a local context can be achieved. Environmental education that was ineffective in its application was most likely due to guidelines and unclear objectives. So, the emphasis is on consistent school-level implications in South African schools. Large-scale assessments mirror the respective nation's education system. Therefore, South African education systems show that language and consistency concerns are present. There is potential for realizing the knowledge in its learners. I want to conclude that as soon as we address the gap in implementing the educational policies, we will then gain the full benefit of large-scale assessment evaluations. Today's podcast, we covered the large-scale assessments, what are they about and how do they offer value, and we covered the South African educational environment.